Good evening. I'd like to call this evening's King's Board of Education work session to order. Mr. Morrow, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Phillips,
Here.
Ms. Groff,
Here.
Ms. Cowan,
Here.
Mr. Skrull,
Here.
Mr. Belfrom.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Morrow?
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Ms. Groff,
Yes.
Mr. Skrull,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Belfrom.
Yes. And first on the agenda tonight are the reports and presentations. And we're fortunate to have Cropper GIS here to present some information. I'll hand it over to Mr. Sears
Yes.
for that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Belfrom and Board of Education. We're pleased tonight to have Matt Cropper from Cropper GIS. This is the continuation of a study that Matt and his company completed for us throughout this year. The first report was in June, and Matt provided some information for us on capacities and utilization, and then he's finalized his findings and report for us this evening. So we appreciate him being on site. I think one of the benefits that we've gained from utilizing Matt is his presence within our district, not only in our buildings, meeting with our principals, but really analyzing how our facilities are being used on a daily basis. So we appreciate his continued work and look forward to the presentation that he's put together this evening for the district demographic study and the utilization forecast. So at this point in time, I'll lob it over to Matt Cropper.
Thank you, Mr. Sears, Chair Belfrom, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. As Mr. Sears said, I'm here to present our findings regarding the demographic study and the utilization forecast. So as the superintendent mentioned, we did do a capacity study at the beginning of this process. And since then we have been working in concert with that, been working on a demographic study. And so we have a good look at what we feel is going to happen to your enrollment in the next 10 years. And then we also have a look at that in regards to utilization. And the utilization forecast is at the back, but the results of the study from what we've seen is to basically solidify that you guys are overcrowded right now. I think we saw that in some of the capacity study work that we did previously. And it's not going to get any better. It's forecasted enrollment's going to not going to give you any relief as it relates to capacity. So your capacity constraints are here, and really what you need to do, in our opinion, is to address the needs of the kids that are living here now. You've had a lot of explosive growth the last 10, 15 years. And these kids are living here now. It's not a matter of if they're going to come, it's that they are here, and your overcrowding exists, and it's not going to get any better. But with that, I'll go ahead and jump into my presentation. And if we just go to the next slide. I've introduced myself the last time, but I'm Matthew Cropper and manage a company who works with school districts all across the United States. And we are experts in this industry and do this kind of work all across the United States and in Ohio. So honored to be working here with this school district. And it's always a blessing to have some work a little bit close to home. I live in Delaware, Ohio, just north of Columbus. So I'm honored to be here and to work on this project. Some of our objectives for tonight is just to give you highlights of the demographic study results and then talk about the utilization forecast. And so we'll just go to the next slide, and starting with collecting data. We've acquired information and collected data from a variety of resources. The school district gave us your enrollment, historical enrollment data, and also we had a database of your enrollment as of fall of 2022 that we can map out and we could understand how many kids live in different neighborhoods and looking at density of students and as it relates to housing communities throughout the school district, which was very informative. We did a lot of extensive collection of information from your local planning agencies. As you probably know, you guys cover a lot of different municipalities. And so there's we reached out to the county. The Regional Planning Commission tracks information on housing and development activity. And then the local township planning offices also manage some of that. So working to try to make sure that we don't leave any stone unturned and get as much information as possible about historical and future planned housing information. Census Bureau is good to give us information about population. So we had 2010 census. And I know that was 13 years ago, but people say, well, how can you use 2010 census when it was 13 years ago? Well, our demographers study population dynamics, and they actually build a population forecast that drives an enrollment forecast. So they use the 2010 census to see what has happened since then and as it relates to your enrollment trends. And we also have 2020 population. We have that from not all of the detailed census data is out yet, believe it or not, but we do have voter age population. And then from that, we can take under 18 population. And so by block area. So that's really helpful information, total population. The Ohio Department of Health provides a lot of information related to birth activity and historical births. And then we also used a lot of other external sources to really get an understanding of your housing. We look at Google Earth and Zillow. Google Earth is really good because we can look at historical aerial imagery over time and see how residential activity is panning out and how it's building out. And then Zillow gives us a lot of good information on home sales activity. So a lot of people are always focused on new home construction and where new homes are going in. And that certainly is an important dynamic. But even more important, and in this district as well, existing home sales and the turn and churn of existing homes is almost more important than new home construction. And so that's something that Zillow gives us a lot of good information on that. You could see we did some mapping. So we looked at your district, and these are your district attendance areas. And you could see how, just to give us an understanding of how the geography is laid out in your district. And we did a series of maps. If you go to the next slide, you could see with your student database, we mapped out each school's enrollment. And this looks much like a weather map. And so you would interpret it the same way. Where you see dark red is where you see the higher concentration. And whether it be rain, in this case, it would be students living in these areas. So you could see which neighborhoods and which communities yield a lot of students and which ones don't yield as many students, just by the magnitude of the blobs that are sort of covering the area. You can look at the next slides. Another one, this is Kings Mill Elementary. It's interesting because you can see that the enrollment for Kings Mills Elementary is not concentrated in one area. It comes from multiple different parts in the district. That northern development on the north part of this attendance area is yielding the greatest number of students that attend Kings Mills Elementary. And then, and there's just other samples for other schools that you could see. South Lebanon, and you could see South Lebanon has that satellite area, that enclave on the southern part of the district, has a good number of students that are coming up to South Lebanon for school. And then we did your intermediate schools, and you could see how your intermediate student population is distributed throughout the district. And then, of course, your junior high and high school. So a lot of similar patterns for the intermediate, junior high, and high school, but this is informative to us as we look at housing data, we look at yields, and we also count students in areas to kind of get an understanding of how many kids are coming out of different housing types. And it helps us interpret what we think you're going to get from new construction and also where neighborhoods may be aging and empty nesting and that kind of thing. It helps give you a little bit of a visual on areas that don't have a lot of kids and then areas that do. So if you go to the next slide, just to talk about our process, like I said, we do an actual population forecast. It's a demographic study of the total population. Because we believe in order to understand what's going to happen with your enrollment, you really have to know what's going to happen to your total population, where areas are, where attendance areas are, and as it relates to turning over. Is an area growing? Is it stable, or is it going to be, is it declining? And so sometimes you'll see enrollment projections or just looking at historical enrollment and they're trend lining that forward. But what that doesn't do is it doesn't catch changes in a trend, where you may see an area that's going to turn over that may have been growing or that may have been stable, and it may turn over and younger families moving in as they age. So in order to do our POP study, we collect census data, the demographers. We have people who are educated in this field, and they look at fertility and mortality, and they look at migration, a lot of different factors. It's important to know the birth rates, and also important to know the number of deaths in an area, so that they can identify how things are changing over time. The next series of slides is a very, very wordy, but I felt like it was important to put in here because there are certain things that we have to assume that we cannot control. And so when we do our demographic study, we assume certain things are going to remain constant, or certain factors will not be violated. And if these assumptions do get violated, usually our forecasts are going to start to become less accurate. So we have a lot of economic assumptions, economic variables. Deep recession is one of a key one, and that this area in our local, regional, state economy doesn't go into deep recession. And we're teetering close to, the demographers really feel like we're on the cusp of something as it relates to a potential recession. So we just have to kind of keep an eye on the economy and see how this plays out. Mortgage rates, we're assuming that they're not going to go above 8%. They got up to over 8% a couple months ago, and I think they're now much lower. I think around 5.6ish, somewhere around there. But what happens is if mortgage rates could increase up above 8%, what it's going to do is just freeze that turn and churn and home sales activity. People are already choosing not to move at more than they have in the past, because interest rates are still somewhat high in people's perspective. So if interest rates go up, our forecasts our numbers are going to be a little too high. If that mortgage rate goes back down to 3%, we'll probably be too low, because it's a lot more homes are going to be bought and sold, a lot more movement, younger families deciding to move into the move up homes and those types of things. So we'll probably be too low. But we'll keep an eye on this. We like to track your enrollment forecast over a couple of years just to see how we're tracking, and we look and gauge it to these assumptions. Things such as mortgage approval, that they don't go to subprime like they did back in before 07. And then things like major lenders not going under, and foreclosures not exceeding certain rates that we have seen. Different indicators that can really cause a change in seismic change in home sales activity that would normally happen. Looking at everything that's currently platted and approved in terms of residential development, expecting that that's all done by 2035, and that the housing units constructed or occupied by 2032. And then we have some unemployment assumptions. And then the next slide talks about transfer policy, so that if you change the way you allow students to come into this district or out of the district, it can cause big changes. So perfect examples, the state of Indiana, they have greatly expanded their out-of-district enrollment policy to allowing students to come in from out of district. And that's causing major fluctuations in people coming into the district from out of the area that you had not anticipated, or people leaving to other neighboring districts. Charter, no charter schools, and we hold the rate of students transferring in and out of this district constant through the life of our forecast. Going to the next slide, we look at basically home turnover assumptions that demographers work through, that you'll have the same rate of public and private attendance, and that the district will have at least an average of 60 new single-family homes sales per year for the next 10 years. Your home sales activity has slowed a lot. You had a lot more homes being sold in the last sort of the last 5 years before COVID. And now you're seeing a lot of there's single family home sales going on in this district, but it's being more dominated by multifamily developments that are coming in. And so we have those on our radar, and those have been anticipated. But as it relates to single family, we're averaging about 60 single family homes being bought and sold every year, new single family in terms of new construction. One of the things we wanted to show you was a population pyramid. So this is something that think of this as a demographic fingerprint for your district and for each attendance area. So this is a pyramid, and on the left, the blue are the males and the red are the females. And then there's age structure. Each bar represents a 5-year age group. And so the 0 to 4 is the bottom and 85 plus is the top. And when you look at this, you could see that the 0 to 4 would be preschoolers living in your district. And then you've got 5 to 9 are elementary age, all the way up to high schoolers, 15 to 19-year-olds. So those first 4 bars are really your school age population. Then you look at the next 3 bars are population that are having kids, that may have children who are those younger age children, either preschoolers or kids who are not in school yet. And then you look at your like 30 to 54, that's the households that most likely have kids. So you're looking at that bar and the size of that bar. Those are the families with children. And then you look higher up, you get some indicators of empty nesting. And then if an area that has a high pocket of empty nesting, that's an area that we would sometimes anticipate turning over in 10 years and younger families start to move in. And then you have the turnover at the higher part of this bracket, 70 to 85. And those are indicate households that are going to be selling the homes and downsizing, and also young families moving in. So we have this for each of your areas. This is your population from 2010. And the typical suburban pattern, this is something that we normally see. You'll see that 0 to 4 bar is smaller than the 5 to 9, and then the 5 to 9 is smaller than the 10 to 14. So what this means is that if you had no new construction from 2010 to now, your enrollment would have dropped because you have a deficit of 0 to 4. You needed new construction and in-migration of families to fill that 0 to 4 out, which you've obviously seen enrollment growth. And so the in-migration has definitely contributed to this. You look at your 2020 estimate, and this is an estimate that the demographers have built based off of that total pop. It's still a suburban pattern, and you still have those deficits in 0 to 4 and 5 to 9 and 10 to 14. So, you still need in-migration in order to remain stable. If that migration stops, then your enrollment will drop. But if as you continue to get families to move into this district, it's filling out those bottom bars, and you're seeing enrollment growth, and that's what we're anticipating. And you'll see each of your attendance areas looks different. This is Burns for 2010, and you can look at Burns again for 2020. More of a stable pattern, not so much of a deficit in those early grades. This is something that we would see indicate more of a stable population and not big changes anticipated in population. Looking at Kings Mill, you could see it's more of a suburban pattern, and especially in 2020, you can see a larger concentration of those households with children. You could see the big sort of how it balloons out in the 40-year-olds, and then their kids are there with them, the 10 to 14, and then the 5 to 9s. But not much population in that family formation ages, which we anticipate changing actually because Kings Mills Elementary is anticipated to get the bulk of your multifamily development that's planned in this district. And South Lebanon is there. And again, it's just more of a typical suburban pattern, not much turnover. But you do have a good number of children and families with kids living in South Lebanon as well. So looking at our forecast results, you could see that the 2020 population is 30,330. And so we did control our estimates to the actual 2020 census pop. So you've gone up a good amount from 2010 to 2020. If you look at that total population, over about 5,000 people. But you could see as it goes to the 2035, we still show growth. You're going to be up about 6,000 more people by the end of this population forecast. But the population is not all with families, with children. Your median age goes from 38.2, which is what it is at right now, up to 40 years old. So the population is getting older, and so not all the growth is attributed to households with children. You see also that we do the demographers forecast births and deaths, and you'll see how the births are forecasted to go up, but not as much as they have in the past. But you see the death rates, the number of deaths is actually going up, just because of the number of people that as they age, the number of more people will be are dying in the district. And so they just due to the population change. We show your natural increase, and then the net migration is what we anticipate for new construction and people moving in versus people moving out, what that net is. Your net migration has been up, and it's around 2,500. We do anticipate that to slow over the next the life of this forecast. The net migration is going to slow and drop, but you're still going to have a net increase of population coming in, and net increase of migration.
Can you remind me, what's the natural increase?
The natural increase is the difference between births and deaths. And so that basically helps us understand that difference. And so as you can see, it stays relatively the same. 720 is where you were from 2015 to 20, and we have you at about 620. And a lot of that's because the death totals are going up, and the births are as well, but not as great as the deaths.
Thank you.
Sure. So all of this basically is done before we do an enrollment forecast, and this information helps us understand where your growth is and what age segments, and how much school age population is going to grow, or what's going to happen with it. And then we use this as a basis for understanding the trend. And then we look at your enrollment data, and then so the population forecast drives the enrollment forecast. So if you go to the enrollment forecast slide, this is your total enrollment. And you could see that your K-4 population as 1,903 this last year. And we have that topping at about 1,984 in 2030-31. So it's going up, and then it's just going to stabilize at 1,961. So it's not explosive growth in your elementaries, but I would consider this more just stable elementary enrollment. Some ebbs and flows and ups and downs, but we don't anticipate it to continue to just spiking upward over the next 10 years. Your intermediate, your junior high, and your high schools are different, though. The other grade cohorts are going up. Your intermediate is going up to about 800, and it peaks at about 828 in 24-25, and then it drops back down to 800. And your junior high again goes up to 800, and then sort of stabilizes around 800. Your high school is the one that gives me the most concern, knowing a lot of the different factors of the risk of utilization in the district, and that your high school population is forecasted to peak at about 1,723 students in 2030-31, and then drop to about 1,650. So the intermediate, junior high, and high school population, these are kids that are here in the district. They are aging through, and so what we always say is the next 5 years we have great confidence in. The second 5, there's a whole lot of things that can happen that can throw a crowbar in our forecast. Just think about the last 10-year periods over the last couple of decades. There's always something that seems to happen in a 10-year period that just changes things with economy and like with COVID, who would have known? But we do feel that the forecasts are reliable, and we're showing pretty substantial growth in your high school, and then it starts to slow as you get to the younger grade cohorts. And then if you go to the utilization forecast, this is basically looking at, you could just go to the table. It just looks at your capacity as it relates to forecasted enrollment. And we do a color scheme that shows green is like a sort of low utilization to high utilization, from a green to red type of color scale. The deepest red are what you see pretty much across yours is the highest magnitude of overcapacity. King's, the early childhood center is a little bit of an anomaly because of the way that enrollment that is controlled, and you're doing with the half-day program. But if you look at your elementary schools, Kings Mills is the only one that's not over 100%. It's forecasted to stay around 90, and at the end of the forecast drop into the 80s. But the good news is that a lot of the new multifamily developments that are coming in are likely can absorb Kings Mills can absorb some of that. But when we put these together, sometimes we see schools have green and others have red. And when we see a lot of green and next to red, that tells us, okay, they could probably redistrict, move boundaries to bring everything into pink and try to get things leveled out with moving some adjacent boundaries. In this case, there's really no relief that we see that can be made by moving boundaries, because everything is over capacity. And the bottom line, my takeaway with this is that the kids are here, and the schools are overcrowded now, and the district needs to catch up to provide capacity for the population that's here, and that's not going anywhere, and it's not going to get any better over time, as a 10-year enrollment forecast suggests. So that's my presentation. I have some other supporting slides and the demographic study on my computer. I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have at this time.
I have, you mentioned in the assumptions, the single family homes. And then I didn't quite catch what you said about the multifamily home construction. How does that factor in?
We look at multifamily. What multifamily, typically the yields out of multifamily usually remain somewhat stable. Once they build them, they'll have a yield, but tenure in a multifamily setting is usually pretty short term. So usually families with kids do live in multifamily settings, depending on the type of multifamily unit and the price point. But usually that yield maintains somewhat stability over the life of the forecast. We do see multifamily being constructed. The bulk of the new construction in this district is multifamily, and we have accounted for that. We've looked at several of these, but you have to dissect some of the multifamily plans sometimes, because they'll say, like, for your biggest one has about 400 units that are planned, that we've seen on our radar. That you break that down and start to look at it even with more granularity, you see that around 100 plus of those units are 1-bedroom units. Those usually, in our experience, don't yield many to no students, very few. But you do have, so that's about, I think about 130 of those, 400 are those single family. And then the rest of those are 2-bedroom units. And the price point on those is we think it's a little high. They're around $2,500 a month for some of those units. Those typically, you don't see a lot of families with kids in those, but in this day and age, it's hard for someone to find a house to buy. And so we anticipate there being families with kids in those. And then once the housing market, we feel simmers down a little bit and the home sales activity picks back up, you'll probably see those yields go down in those multifamily settings.
Okay.
So we have looked at, there's about 4 or 5 different units, multifamily developments throughout the district. And we tracked those and looked at those. And there's going to be other multifamily developments, probably that's not on our radar. But we anticipate a certain level of development to occur, and that you need to have the ongoing development of single and multifamily just in order to remain stable and not have, if all of that stops, your enrollment will start declining.
Thank you.
Yeah, so looking at these projections you made, and I know you've done this all over the state and all across. Has there been any studies going back to see how your actual projections, if they played out accurately? So say some maybe you did 10 or 15 years ago, did they line up with your projections?
Yes, sir. And in terms of the population forecast,
Right.
Yes, the population side, population forecasts are usually very accurate. But demographer was talking to me just yesterday about a forecast that he did that has, I think, around 130,000 people in it, and he was off by about 10. And so he gets nervous when he does that, because then the school district expects that level of accuracy every time.
Right.
But no, the population studies and the basis of the methodology they do is best practice, and it is the best method for forecasting population. They are highly accurate.
So we can count on these numbers to be pretty solid.
Yes, sir. I would.
Okay.
I have the highest confidence in these, and unless something changes with the economy as we keep an eye on it, I think that we like to do a enrollment tracking for a couple years to see how we're tracking, just so that, because we're always interested in how accurate we are too, so that we can always get better. And if we start to deviate from our forecast, your enrollment deviates from forecast, we always look at those assumptions and say, what's happened in the assumptions that's different than what we have anticipated or assumed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the best way to really gauge accuracy of these. These are a demographic with what we have established, and based off the demographic methodology, this is what's going to happen to your enrollment. And error comes in when there's things that we don't anticipate. Usually it's migration with construction that wasn't anticipated, but lately there's been a lot of other much bigger things that have caused changes or impacted our accuracy, like COVID and those types of things.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Crawford. In the district, we keep seeing a growth of English language learner families moving in. We know also sometimes when they move in, it could be generational families together,
Mhm.
or it could be families where there's maybe 3 wives and 3 husbands that move into one apartment
Mhm. Mhm.
just to make a living for themselves.
Sure.
Did you take any of that into account?
Absolutely. That's something we hear. Over the last 10 years, we've heard a lot more of that from school districts experiencing that. And what we like to say is there's a lot of people living in this district. There are those cases where you have three families splitting a cost of a house and things like that. Those are small percentage of the population. So those do exist. And it exists in the district and exists in a lot of places that we study, but we also can't lean too heavily on that as a variable that for the entire population. So it's a smaller subset of the population, and it's not representative of enough of your population to cause a big change in what we're forecasting.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned for our preschool campus, the half day impacting the utilization. For our 3 K-4 campuses, we currently have full day kindergarten, and kindergarten isn't the whole portion as the preschool building. It's just one of our grades. But do you have any thoughts that if there were half day kindergarten on those campuses, how that would affect the utilization numbers?
Yeah, if you had half-day kindergarten, then you would gain your kindergarten cohort you would basically take it in half. And so if you did go to half-day kindergarten, it would lower the utilization of the buildings because you'd get double use out of a space for AM and PM. So switching from full day to half-day kindergarten would definitely lower the overall utilization of your buildings. I don't think it's, knowing the magnitude of the overcrowding in your buildings, I don't know if it's would be enough to solve your overcrowding concerns in the district, but it could definitely contribute to lowering your utilization.
Thank you.
Just looking at this particular slide, I'm going to throw the first question down here to Mr. Lucky. These capacity numbers here for the buildings, is that where do those numbers come from?
The capacity numbers are that's as a result of our capacity study earlier this summer.
Oh, okay. So those aren't like OFCC numbers. Okay.
Those are from us walking through the buildings, meeting with the principals, and doing that capacity study. Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you. And yeah, I see the notation you have here, even for this building, with that enrollment assumption of 208, but I think we're already beyond that now, Mr. Spinner. So I
208 for which grade level?
for preschool, I see that he has a note, the asterisk there, the footnote, the total daily forecasted enrollment for King's KECC is 208. But with the half-day sessions, he has it at 104. Don't we have more than 208 now?
Yeah, I think we're exceeding. Mrs. Martin may be able to speak to this a little bit better.
So all I'm saying is to say that is, and maybe that's just since Mr. Cropper, your team did the data analysis, that utilization is probably higher.
So typically with this preschool, the way our numbers are counted is we only typically count the special ed students at the end of the year. So
Oh,
it
okay.
doesn't count the other preschool students that are down there opposite of them.
Okay.
That's for EMIS. So I do wonder if maybe those are some of their numbers, because we end up at about a little over 100 at the end of the year with special ed numbers. So I have a
Gotcha.
feeling that's it.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's important just on why we're on that topic. If you look at the utilization forecast, the enrollment for our overall enrollment is 4899. But if you look on the previous slide where the enrollment overall is 5,003, the difference there is the 104 students that have been not accounted for the capacity utilization forecast. So there's not a discrepancy in the numbers. It's just in the utilization forecast. The KECC was factored at a 104 because there's really 208 projected students, but would they only use, because it's a half-day program, so they divide it in half. So the difference between, there will be 104 student discrepancy, and that's why. I think it's
Yes, sir. That's good point.
Is
That's
that, am
absolutely-
I saying that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct. The utilization forecast is really more of a focus on utilization. And you are correct that is the difference there. It's that half day. We only take half of that population to look at utilization for this particular building.
So next question I have, Matt, can you clarify? So this chart has a lot of red, which I have another question about in a second. What's an ideal, in your expert opinion, from the work you've done throughout the country, what's an ideal utilization range? I know it's not going to be an exact
Yeah.
number, but what's an ideal range?
I mean, I would say ideally somewhere between 75 and 95%. So that the lighter green and the pink, like what you see at Kings Mills, that elementary can go a little bit higher, 90, 95, and they'd still be okay. Even when they get to 100, they're not as bad as when you see 100% in a high school, because elementary kids stay in the classroom. The teacher, they don't travel to the teacher, and the other higher grades, it's much more problematic when you see overcrowding, because those kids have to travel from room to room, and then all that the ebbs and flows between periods really starts to put a strain on the facility. So I'd say, high school, ideally you'd like to see a high school around 85% to give you some room flexibility, 85 to 90, and then as you get younger, earlier grades, you can go a little bit higher, and what in my opinion.
So my follow-up question, and based on the data you've presented, your explanation there, in understanding we have, and we'll take the KECC out of this question. How many of our buildings, in your expert opinion, are over capacity?
I mean, every one except for Kings Mills Elementary. I mean, everything that's in the deep red that's top of the scale. It's the more of a critical overcrowding scenario, and from our standpoint. So yeah, every single building is well over. We're not talking just around 100%. I mean, we're talking over. Most of them are over 110%, and your high school is 130%. So it's not just teetering on the edge of pink and dark red. These are well into the red. So my opinion is something definitely needs to be done in the district to add capacity at all levels to address the overcrowding, in my opinion.
You mentioned something in your presentation that the kids are here now, but you don't see it getting better. Can you describe that a little bit for me, please?
Yeah, the overcrowding that exists now is not. Sometimes we work with districts that are not overcrowded. They may be more pink to green right now, but they anticipate a lot of explosive growth. So we have seen districts that want to add capacity to anticipate future growth, and that's not the case here. You're not, in my opinion, you don't need to build for the kids that are going to come. You need to build for the students that are here now, and that it's not a matter of we need to build for what we think is we're going to have. We need to build for what we have right now living in this district in our buildings.
Thank you.
Okay. You said that you feel extremely confident in the forecast for the next 5 years. So when I look at the high school in 28, 29, they'll be at 161%. And if you said we should aim for 80 to 85%, that's double
Yeah, I mean,
in that 5-year period.
I know. I mean, my gut says that you need about a 16 or 1700 seat high school. But maybe even 1,800 seats. You know what you have to determine how big you want to make your how big you want to have a high school be. You know, even if your high school was 1,600, it would do great measures to weather the storm that's here and that's coming. But you know, it's like, because you look out past beyond this forecast, you know, when you talk about adding capital construction and adding space, school facility space, you know, you're building something that for the next 50, 60 plus years. And so you have to be mindful of that. But I really don't think that you're going to be dropping down to below, you know, the 1,600 number. So it ends at about 1,654. And so, yes, you're already over by about 400 students right now. So it's not going to get any better.
So I have a question in terms of safety. At what point should we be alarmed of just safety issues like fire drill, like having to get kids out?
That's what I was talking with Matt and Mr. Sears at the just before this. It's, you know, they get to that number, a building that has 1,000 seats. I'm not a safety expert, but I can only imagine that you start getting into issues where the fire department won't allow any more in there. And so, I mean, I don't know. I know that the building, and I always think of the high school because that's your most overcrowded setting. And walking through that building, you're already running into safety challenges. And so, I mean, can you imagine what you're dealing with now? And then picture 300 more students in there.
Right.
So, I mean, that's where you're basically going to have to start. If you don't do anything, what we see districts do that are this overcrowded, they'll start putting portables out, and then you end up with 500 units of portables out. And then in order to accommodate all that, they bring in a cafeteria portable. And I've seen, you know, school districts that have portable cafeterias because the cafeteria in the facility can't handle that population. So you almost have a portable school, a mobile school. And I've seen a lot of that in other districts. It's not ideal.
Thank you for that. My next question for you is priorities. You mentioned the high school would be your number one priority in your opinion. What order would you put after that? And does the age of the building come into play when you give that recommendation?
Yeah, you know, and I'm not a facilities expert. I've walked through hundreds of facilities and done a lot of capacity studies, but I don't necessarily have a good bead on the facility condition of them. But I would recommend that you have somebody who has a lot of good experience in assessing facilities. Take a look at the condition of the facility. The thing is that you can't just add on classrooms to something like the high school because your core space is already pressed. And so you have to address that core space. And so it's going to require some creative thought. And usually what I see in a district like this is they start planning things accordingly, like one option, one scenario. And I don't want to even paint myself or you guys into a corner of a scenario that's most ideal. But you'll see things like in this case I've seen where they'll build a new high school and then they'll move the junior high into the high school because the junior high population is 800 and your high school's 1,000 capacity. So that junior high population could fit in there. So, you know, you want to make best use of all the space that you have when you develop a plan. And it's maybe something like that. And my first thought was that would be maybe an ideal scenario because I know your high school can't just add on a wing of classrooms because the core spaces are already stacked. But I would really look more at your, in my opinion, it's the high school and then your your, 5 through 12 population is the population that I would address first. But, a lot of it also depends on the Burns Elementary is another one that is in really old school. You've expanded over the decades to that building, added classroom space, but they don't have a whole lot of core capacity. So not being a facility expert, I know that Burns is probably the building that is in probably the worst shape in terms of condition, and your elementary schools. And so that's all that needs to be accounted for.
Mr. Cropper, if you could, I know you did this the last time you were here, but if you could you give us just a quick synopsis of how you come up with these capacity numbers for each building?
Yes, sir.
Just as a reminder.
Absolutely. We collected floor plans of all the buildings, looked at the floor plans, and before I even came out, I was looking at general classroom spaces for elementary schools. Which ones are the general classrooms? And then we meet with the principals, the school building administrators, and they help us understand how the building is being used. Sometimes a principal is spreading out into closets and other spaces that are not educational spaces. So we anticipate, with that interview, we get a better understanding of how they're using the building, whether they maybe are spreading out into space that they don't need, or if they're using space that they don't have. And so we get an inventory at the elementary level, all of your general classrooms. We also make sure that we set aside space for resource and pull-out instruction so that you can deliver the programs that you need to deliver, and trying to get kids out of the hallways for them, like, those one-on-one pull-out sessions and those types of things. When you start to get up in the upper levels, the education's a little bit different, and sometimes labs are integrated with classrooms and those specialty spaces. And so in those cases, those are counted in the capacity, but we don't count the, can't recall. Do you have music and art here in all of your buildings? So those, we don't count that in your capacity. And then other non-traditional spaces in your high school and your other your junior high and your intermediates, like chorus. If it's a chorus room and it has like the tiered flooring where people students can sit there for chorus, that's usually not counted in the capacity. We look at it as if it can be used for a general education setting, we count it in the capacity. Or if you have like a wood shop and you have sort of a setting where there's some desks and kids are sitting at a desk, and then they have the wood shop area where they go do work. We only count the capacity of the desk area, and we don't double count that and the other space. So you'll see a lot of other capacities done, what you may have heard of design capacity. Very common way is they'll just look at total square footage of a building, and they'll apply a square foot per student to get a capacity number. And we don't like that method, because that assumes the space of the auditorium space and cafeteria, even hallway space, is kind of cooked into that capacity number. And this is what we refer to more as a functional capacity.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Questions? So I'm going to put you on the spot. In your expert opinion, where are we in terms of, like, compare us to, if you could, I'm putting you on the spot.
Sure.
Just with the basis, based on our utilization, is it about what you typically see? Do we seem to be what end of the graph are we?
I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah, no, you're
Can you
more,
rate?
you're definitely more severe than we normally see.
Wait.
Yeah. And
You didn't hold back there, Mr. Cropper. I like.
we do this kind of work all across the country. Usually, if I see something that's teetering around 100% from the district total, I think it's a problem. But a lot of school districts like to operate right at 100%. I do a lot of work in Baltimore County, Maryland, and they operate buildings at 100%. They don't start to address needs until they get to 100%. Same thing in Billings, Montana, or a lot of these Montana districts. They're very conservative with their space, and buildings are running around 100%. But you start to get to 111, 112, there's no district that doesn't start looking at ways to address that through capital construction. So if you're, if I'm looking at a scale, you're at the top end of the scale in terms of overcrowding that I've seen from other districts.
Thank you.
Hearing all of that, should we direct Mr. Sears to start doing some communication out to the committee, maybe the summary of this report, starting to let our community know the information that we have now and maybe gather some other input based on that?
I think so.
I think that's a great idea, Peggy.
Yeah,
I
no
do.
issue with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this solidifies what people that are in the buildings know.
Mhm.
But it's nice to quantify it.
Mhm.
So thank you for
Absolutely.
getting like a firm number on it.
We have any more questions? No, Mr. Cropper, once again, appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sir.
I'll just say to the public, I mean, we brought in someone who really is, because I snooped around and asked about you. We really did get a subject matter expert and someone who is, yes, becomes very highly recommended. So I would applaud Mr. Sears, Mr. Morrow, Mr. Lucky in that regard. And I think this is, obviously it's topical, but in the time that I've been here, this is probably the best. This is the best data we've had compiled on this in terms of, where we are with the utilization. And it does speaks to what we see in the buildings. For those of us, have administrators here, we have administrators in the back. I think I didn't see anyone seem surprised at all about these percentages. It was more affirming than anything else. So I appreciate, Ms. Cropper, all the work that your team's done for us here at Kings, and we'll go forward with it. Ms. Sears, do you have anything to add?
No, I think we'll work to summarize the communication from Mr. Cropper. We will certainly also link this presentation into any communication that goes out, because I think, we can communicate and reiterate a lot of things that were said, but it's also that I appreciate Matt's willingness to be here and field questions from us to really get a true understanding. So I think we'll be able to communicate kind of the outcomes. I think the first piece is to ensure our community understands the data behind the need, because there's been attempts in the past to rectify some of the space issues or projected space issues. And I think what stuck out to me, not having lived that here in this district, is that, at that time, it might have been projected, like we're projecting certain numbers, and then we're going to try to fix like what we're projecting to happen. What sticks out to me is that it's here now. And so from a principal standpoint, and I know Mr. Lucky, the work, he presented information earlier this summer on all the creative things that our principals are doing each and every day to actually fit the kids in the building and utilize space in ways that it's not meant to be used to try to meet kids' needs. I think we'll be, communicating some of those pieces as well. And there's been work this summer to solidify spaces that are, frankly, a multi-purpose room at JF Burns is now a series of 8 little office or small group rooms that we've had to put walls up, and that's not what the space is intended for, and it's not best practice for kids. What I would say is, as I would conclude this conversation, is I like to relate things back to where we're going, the initiatives we're working on, and the direction we're going as a school district. And when you think about our culture of growth, when you think about our Power 5 future skills, and we think about personalization of learning, all of those come with significant needs, but space plays an issue with that. And so in order to truly advance our kids instructionally with work around our Power Five skills and the personalization of learning, space can be a limiting factor of that. And you know, it's a rationale for why we need to continue to work creatively to address not only the space needs, but if we're going to deliver future focused instruction, you need to have facilities that are going to match your mission and vision. So that's a little more theoretical than the work you were presenting tonight. But I think it plays a factor into a future direction we're going to go. That if we want to get creative and do some amazing work with kids, you need to have space that matches that. And right now we're limited in that when we're having students in small groups in closets and server rooms and a lot of the other things that I know Mr. Lucky has presented. So appreciate your work tonight. We'll work to solidify this in succinct communication. And we will link a lot of the information of the report on our website, et cetera. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Cropper.
for coming out.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Next on the agenda are the discussion items for the treasurer, Mr. Morrow.
Thank you. Number 1 through 3 is just the typical minutes from our last few meetings. I asked that the board take a look at those and give me any issues that you see. Number 4, so South Lebanon did issue in the middle 2000s an economic development debt, essentially to improve Mason Morrow Millgrove to be able to put houses and other residences. So I worked with them and a municipal advisor to refinance that debt. We generate an extra $90,000 to $94,000 a year starting in 2027, and we don't really have to do anything other than refinance the debt. So it's a great deal for us. It's one of those things that's already hanging out there and being proactive and making sure we're getting the best rate to generate revenues for the school. So it's exciting. Number 4. Number 5, this is a compliance matter. Annually, we're required to report to the state of Ohio certain interest-bearing investments that we make. So as a school district, we're allowed to invest in very safe commercial debt, essentially. So we're required to report to the state and what we're investing in and what we earned interest on. So this is just a compliance item. Number 6, financial items. You'll notice that the normal monthly financials aren't within here. I'm holding off until the August 28th meeting to give myself some more time to work on that. So I'll present out on that at the August 28th meeting. Public records log, just a log of public records requests. You'll see we're pretty well up to date. We have one outstanding that just came in yesterday, but been working to get those done in a timely fashion.
Mr. Morrow, you mentioned with the TIF refunding that the $90,000 that begins in 2027. Is that just part of that negotiation? Did I miss that in the?
It's really part of, they uncovered our municipal advisor uncovered some issues with the original debt issuance by the village or by the city, excuse me. So they needed to use some of the money to rectify a prior issue. So that
Gotcha.
delayed when we start to see benefit. I did try to get that amount spread out over the entire life so we could start to see payments sooner. But I was advised that it's not an option since they uncovered an issue. It had to be paid off first.
Gotcha.
But it was worth a shot to try to get the money sooner.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. Did we have any more questions for Mr. Morrow? Thank you to you and your team for that continued diligence to make sure, our TIFs and what have you are they're just correct, right?
Mhm.
We're getting the income that we should be getting. So I appreciate that. And
Absolutely.
Riverside,
Before we move on, are there any potential other items out there that we may have that you're looking into?
That's a great question. My predecessor spent a lot of time and energy on getting us up to date with all of our entities. We have these agreements with Lebanon, Mason, South Lebanon currently. I was able to find one that we had outstanding balance owed of about $200,000 from the city of Lebanon. So they are going to repay us that $200,000 in back payments in January of 24. And then we'll get the annual payments that we should have been getting. So between the work that he's done and then my continuation and rechecking of work, I feel good about where we're at now and that we are getting all the money that we should be getting.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yep.
thank you. Next on the agenda are discussion items for the superintendent, Mr. Sears.
Just one, this evening, we have a approval for a band trip regional competition at the end of October. And so we'll be seeking approval for that at the August 28th meeting.
I think they're going to Toledo, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Sears. Next on the agenda are the discussion items for the assistant superintendent regarding HR and business. I believe we do have a couple of items that we'll need to take a roll for this evening. Do I need to refresh? I got it. Mr. Spinner.
Thank you, President Belfram, King's Board of Education. 4 items under our agenda this evening. First up, personnel. A couple of highlights to share with you this evening. In July, as you remember, Ron Cordini was approved as our Director of Childcare and Summer Camp Programming. I am pleased to announce this evening that thanks to Mr. Cordini's efforts, as of tonight, our before and after care programs are fully staffed. Kudos to Mr. Cordini. We're very excited that our before and after care programs are in that situation. So Mr. Cordini's move did vacate his high school assistant principal position. However, and tonight we are recommending that Taylor Rose for reassignment from her junior high assistant principal position to the high school assistant principal position. Taylor expressed great interest in this opportunity, and we believe it to be an excellent fit, adding a dynamic teammate to the high school, in large part to the job she has done at King's Junior High School, in addition to her experience with curriculum and instruction. So as those dominoes continue to fall, additionally, I would like to, at this time, introduce our recommendation for interim assistant principal at King's Junior High School. He is here with us tonight, Mr. Caleb Keaton. Caleb is originally from Waynesville and a graduate of Lindsey Wilson College, where he studied middle-level education and played football. After graduation, Caleb taught 5th grade math in Wilmington for 2 school years before initially joining the King staff at Columbia Intermediate School. There, he served our district as a 6th grade science teacher for 2 years, and at King's Junior High School, he taught 8th grade science for 3 years. Caleb earned his master's degree in educational administration from Xavier University. He lives in the King's local school district with his wife, Hannah, and their children, Foster and Ozzy, who he shared with me are both future knights. Caleb is super excited to embrace this new opportunity as the assistant principal of King's Junior High School, and he looks forward to serving the students and teachers. Mr. Eric Dunn, principal of King's Junior High School, had this to say: Caleb's passion for science, along with his strong connections with students, has made him a fan favorite within the junior high school community. In addition to serving as an excellent teacher and coach, Mr. Keaton has worked diligently to develop meaningful relationships, collaborating on several committees to improve our school and district. We are looking forward to the potential of working with Caleb in this new role. King's School Board of Education, Mr. Caleb Keaton.
Yes.
Happy to answer any additional questions you may have about those dominoes and or any of the personnel items on tonight's agenda. Next up is
I'd just
Mr.
like
Sears.
to say
Absolutely.
one thing. I'd like to welcome Mr. Keaton to the administrative team. over the last couple of years, Mr. Keaton has taken a extensive role in leadership within our school district. He has been a part of our PD team with Mr. Freeman and Mrs. Martin, playing an instrumental role there. And he's also been a very active participant in our King's Leadership Academy. And so we've seen Caleb demonstrate leadership and the capacity for that over the last couple of years. So we're excited that he gets the opportunity to demonstrate that for all of the students and staff at King's High School, or King's Junior High. So welcome, Caleb. We're appreciative of your interest and wish you the best this year.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's my understanding at those administrative meetings, rookie buys breakfast, donuts.
We get lots of duty. I found out a few more today already.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Spinner. go ahead.
No, he had to speak today. That was like, oh, somebody, yeah, you're doing that.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Mr. Sears, Mr. Belfram. Item number 2, our memorandum of understanding, reemploying retired teachers. This is under a program, our personnel savings program that we began last school year. Our personnel savings program, as you remember, offers teachers who would like to continue their teaching career, but are eligible to retire at an unreduced benefit through the state teachers retirement system. So it gives them the opportunity to begin collecting on their retirement they have paid into their entire career, while we are able to hire back experienced, welcome teachers back to our district at a lower step and rate, thus saving the school district. Last year, this program was a fit for 7 of our employees, thus saving the school district over $250,000 in salary and benefits. This school year, we were a fit for 1 staff member, saving the district almost $40,000 in salary and benefits. That teacher on tonight's agenda is Miss Jill Swanson, and this memorandum of understanding is the agreement that will be folded into her new contract with the King's Education Association. The only changes in the memorandum from this year to last are the dates, updating the dates and times.
Any questions from Mr. Sears regarding items 1 and 2? No. All right, with that, can I have a motion to approve items 1 and 2? Except for temporary employment.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Morrow, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Skirl,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Ms. Groff,
Yes.
Mr. Belfram.
Yes. And now may I have a motion to approve the temporary positions as they relate to item 1. This evening.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion. Mr. Morrow, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Belfram,
Yes.
Mr. Skirl,
I'm abstaining from this vote.
Ms. Groff,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
Item number 4 under the agenda is an update on board policy. It's a first reading for policy 5136, having to do with personal communication devices. This is more in line with our student handbooks between 2 grade bands, K through 6 and 7 through 12. Those changes can be found in paragraphs 2 and 3. 7 through 12 may use personal communication devices as long as they do not create a distraction or disruption or otherwise interfere with the educational environment. While grades K through 6 use of personal communication devices must be approved by a teacher or administrator. So clarifying those 2 grade bands when it comes to PCDs in our student handbooks.
Can I ask a question on this?
Sure.
I noticed it talks about on school property or a school sponsored activity. How does that work with things like field trips, athletic events? I mean, I guess that's school property and school but it wouldn't. I'm just trying to see where the parameters are.
Sure, and I think all school sponsored activities, thus like the ones you mentioned, would fall under this policy as well. If field trips, for instance, it would be advisable by the teacher or administration for grades pre-K through 6. 7 through 12 would have much more flexibility.
Okay, what about like on a weekend, but it's talking about a school function? Would that fall under that or not necessarily? Does that get gray?
I think that gets a little bit gray. I think if it becomes in the sphere of influence for a school district, if it starts to impact or become a disruption to the educational environment, then it could be something that is concerning and something we may address, but otherwise wouldn't normally be something that would fall into this purview.
Okay, all right. I think it's a good policy for parents to review with their kids. Like, this is important stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Will we have the second reading at the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, second reading will be at the August 28th Board of Education meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Spinner? All right, next on the agenda. Mrs. Martin, looks like you, Mr.
Oh, you know, I
Have
want to
any?
talk for just a minute.
Okay.
Yes, we didn't put it on there, but we just sent out today, our August 14th professional development session for all of our teachers. So we changed our in-service full day to right before the opening day. So teachers have a full professional development day on the 14th, signing up like crazy today. We're very surprised how many people are reading their emails already today. And then the 15th is opening day, and we have about a half a day of professional development. So we're excited this year going into professional development because that PD team has worked for about 2 years, really trying to set up a new schedule and a way we're doing it. We're really kicking that off this year. So very excited for all the work the PD team has really done, and we start next week. So we're excited for that.
Very excited. Any questions for Mrs. Martin? No? Next on our agenda are items presented by the board. Did we have anything to present this evening?
Just a reminder, I gave you a very rough draft of public participation, trying to make sure that what Mr. Belfram says about public participation follows our policy more closely. And then as far as the rules, and we'll discuss that during our open meeting or our regular meeting. Okay.
Thank you for that, Ms. Phillips. And next on the agenda is the executive session. We would like to enter into executive session for the following purposes: to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, and to prepare for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with employees. With that, may I have a motion to enter into executive session this evening?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Morrow.
Mr. Skrull,
Yes.
Ms. Groff,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Belfram.
Yes. We have exited executive session. Thank you all for your patience. May I have a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion. Mr. Morrow?
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Belfrom,
Yes,
Mr. Skirl,
Yes.
Ms. Groff,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
meeting's adjourned. Everyone have a fantastic evening.